we all hear stories about the development timeline for projects in China. And I have a strap line in my head, which is your starting point is how do you build something as quickly as the Chinese? And how do you get it permitted? Permitting is clearly a key factor in that. How do you raise capital? And so that's the challenge that I set for myself and also for the team.
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Triangle Investor Interviews. I'm your host Lucian Valkovic, and before I announce my guest, just a reminder of a disclaimer. This interview and all my interviews are not a recommendation to buy, sell, shares, products, services. Always do your due diligence and consult with your financial advisor. And today's guest is Kurt Budge, CEO of For Leading Edge Materials, a company with portfolio of critical minerals projects located in the EU. Kurt, thank you for joining me today. Welcome.
Thank you, Lucian.
It is my pleasure to have you. You are for the first time in my show. I had Eric a few months ago. Frankly, I believe it was 1 year ago or something like that. And when we are talking about a year ago, it has been a year since you were appointed as a CEO of Leading Edge. So my congrats to you.
Thank you very much.
As I know, you have more than 30 years of experience in the mining sector, including almost 10 years of working in Sweden. How has all your prior experiences, especially with the iron ore project and Nordic graphite markets, shaped your approach to leading edge materials?
Well, I really enjoy working in Sweden because it's a very innovative and collaborative mining sector. I think even though in my previous role it took me a long time to get the mining lease for the Kallak iron ore project, that I learned a lot about how the decision-making authorities and the politicians in Sweden work. I benefited from gaining a lot of connections because I had to talk to a lot of people. So I understand how things work. I know a lot of people in the industry, and it's a good part of the world to be in mining. The Nordics have a very long history of mining, over thousands of years, and the industry today is one of the most innovative in the world. So, and it's dynamic as well. And clearly, at this point in time, in Europe, when we're talking about critical raw materials specifically, it's a really good time to be in the mining industry, and especially in the Nordics.
Great. The Norra Kärr project is a key focus for your company and a candidate for strategic project status under the EU Critical Raw Minerals Act. Can you share the latest progress on the exploration concession application and environmental work for this project?
Yeah, so the mining lease application was submitted last December. Clearly in the history of Norra Kärr has already had a mining lease in the past in 2013. And that was revoked and returned back to an application. I won't go into the details of why that happened. Permitting in Sweden was not straightforward in that time. But what happened around 2021 was a complete redesign of the Norra Kärr project. So what you have at site now is effectively a quarry. And that quarry will produce a eudialyte concentrate, a heavy rare earth element concentrate, but also industrial minerals, particularly nepheline cyanide, for which there's an established market. So we have a really good commercial opportunity with Norra Kärr. The application for the mining lease now is in consultation. That process takes place over the next 1 to 2 months. And then the mining inspectorate will make a decision, we hope, sometimes towards the back end of the third quarter, fourth quarter this year. Permit decisions are key milestones for any project. With the Critical Raw Materials Act and the strategic project application, we submitted in the first call last year. So the first list of 47 projects was announced in March by the EU. We weren't on the list. What I explained to investors at the time was, whatever the EU decided, we were still a strategic project. As we've seen with the geopolitics recently, new US president, tariffs, the fallout from moves made in the US, how the Chinese have responded, and specifically how they've responded in terms of restricting exports of rare earth elements, that Norra Kärr is a critically important project if you want to manufacture permanent magnets in the EU. And I think that's something that I'm trying to reinforce, is that we can sustainably produce heavy rare earth elements from Norra Kärr. And actually, when you think about Norra Kärr, you should be thinking about the manufacturing of permanent magnets, because we are part of a value chain. It's not just a project in isolation. It's part of a whole value chain in Europe, which needs to be established for the security of supply.
Yeah. Kurt, how does the Rapid Development Plan aim to accelerate production at Norra Kärr? And what role does the neophilene-senite, sorry if I said it wrong, play in the economic viability?
So the Rapid Development Plan is very much around changing mindsets about how quickly things need to be done. We all hear stories about the development timeline for projects in China, and I have a strap line in my head, which is, your starting point is how do you build something as quickly as the Chinese, and how do you get it permitted? Permitting is clearly a key factor in that. How do you raise capital? And so that's the challenge that I set for myself and also for the team, is to think in those terms. So when we think about Norra Kärr, the actual extraction part is not complicated. This is, as I mentioned before, a quarry. So the key design change for Norra Kärr from the previous concept was that we went from a rare earths only operation to producing rare earths and industrial minerals. And there are two industrial minerals that we're looking to produce, one of which is nepheline cyanide. And when the scoping study was done in 2021, the depth of technical work hadn't been completed. So the consultant at the time could only give it a preliminary economic status. And the price range that we were using for nepheline cyanide specifically, there were three different products that we envisaged, and the price range was $6 to $25 a ton. This is 2021 prices. At the time, depending on which markets you were looking to serve, you could attract prices of $100 to $500 a ton, which on 730,000 tons a year is a meaningful difference to the economics of the project. Clearly, when we that's looking at the prices then, and we've got to look at the prices now. But that is still a real key market for us. So the Rapid Development Plan looks at how quickly you can get the asset into operation, and I'm envisaging that's 3 to 4 years. The 3 years is everything goes as quick as it can, and because what you have is the preparation for environmental permit applications. The time it takes for authorities in Sweden to process that environmental permit application, and then the time for construction. But it's really a case of, we have a strong commercial opportunity both around industrial minerals, the nepheline cyanide particularly, and the rare earth story, to build a business at Norra Kärr, and to do it in a time frame which meets what the EU is looking for, is that projects to make a meaningful contribution to security of supply around critical raw materials by 2030.
Yeah, when it comes to the infrastructure over there, I would like to address that. Can you tell me, what do you have on site over there? I mean, in the terms of infrastructure and all other things related to one big project like this one.
I mean, the great thing about Norra Kärr is that it sits immediately adjacent to the E4, which is one of Sweden's major road arteries in the country. So we can effectively truck material to the E4 and then move to another destination and that's most likely, if it's volume that we're moving, to move to a rail point. There's one location which is tens of kilometers to the north that we've looked at as part of the scoping study, and then you're immediately onto rail. And you're onto rail, and then the ports, there are a number of different ports across Sweden. So we are road, rail, port access, and then you're into European markets or further afield. So we have that in terms of logistics and transport infrastructure. We have access to renewable power. If anybody looks at the pictures in the corporate presentation, you will see that there are windmills to the south of Norra Kärr. There's also windmills all over Sweden. And clearly Sweden has a very strong advantage with regards to renewable power from hydroelectric. So I've said, in the years that I've been working in Sweden, you can effectively plug a mine into the grid and reduce that, CO2 footprint that's usually associated with industrial operations. But clearly, if we produce a UGLite concentrate, this heavy rare earth concentrate, we need to find somewhere to process that. And so what we're doing is we're looking at several options, one of which is in the short term, are there other processors of that material? But further in our development plan is to build our own downstream facility in Sweden to do further processing steps and eventually separation.
Yeah, your company has a portfolio that includes natural graphite at Woxna and high-grade nickel and cobalt at Bihor Sud. How do these projects complement Norra Kärr in positioning the company as a key supplier of critical raw materials in Europe?
Well, I think geographically, you've got a company that's focused on the European Union. And so we come under the umbrella of the Critical Raw Materials Act and all member states complying with that and doing whatever they can to ensure Europe's security going forward in terms of supply of critical raw materials. With both Norra Kärr and Woxna, so Woxna is a mine, full stop. It's a mine that is on care and maintenance, but what we announced in February was this plan to look at restarting the operation to determine whether or not we can make a viable business from the assets. And again, when I was in Brussels 2 weeks ago for the EIT Raw Materials event, the conversation is around Europe has policy. Now we need action, and we also need capital. And so there's this general, and this is everybody saying it. It's not just me as a CEO of a junior mining company. It's everybody saying it. So with Woxna, we have a built mine, and we're working, dusting off an in-house restart plan that was done in 2022 with a view to seeing if we can come up with a commercial base case producing flake graphite concentrate. I think the challenge you have with some critical raw materials, and specifically natural graphite and rare earth elements, is that consumers further down the value chain or manufacturers of products that need those raw materials are still looking at the global market prices, and they're still seeing a Chinese price that's being traded in the market, and so they're still beating the producer over the head with a stick. But as we've seen in rare earths, China can implement export restrictions, and then supply chains have to completely reconfigure themselves. So what we're looking at is, my view is, is that you've got the opportunity for greater collaboration in the supply chain, so that the next person further down from the primary raw material producer is looking for security of supply. They want to know that there is a source. And clearly this matters to consumers, transparency and traceability of where that raw material comes from, that it's produced in the right ethical ways, the highest standards of ESG, and they want to know that if they make an order, it's going to get delivered, and also they can manage their stockpiles. Because earlier this year we've been hearing a lot, the EC, the European Commission, produced a white paper on stockpiling, and that was both specific to armaments and defense, and rare earth elements and graphite go into many defense applications. Both stockpiling of armaments and equipment, but also critical raw materials. So we know that you can effectively look at Woxna and you can look at Norra Kärr and say that these are two surface mining projects where with the intention, you can open those projects up in a fairly short space of time and start producing raw materials that Europe needs.
Yeah, that brings me to my next question. You mentioned the restart plan that you are doing in-house. I know that you can talk specifics, but when it comes to the timeline, I would like to hear more about the timeline. You mentioned it could be quickly, but how quickly?
So back in February, I said that we would have numbers on Norra Kärr and Woxna by the end of during the second quarter. Those studies would be completed. Things always take a little bit longer. What I've experienced in this industry, and sometimes I'm over optimistic, but I think that we're looking at the opportunities to get technical work done this year, in the next few months. And so you're not nailing me down completely, but I'm just saying that work is ongoing at the moment, and we'll be putting further updates out to the market about sort of those timelines. I'm speaking to engineering consultants specifically around Woxna at the moment to determine what study work we should be doing and how quickly we can get it done. Because when I was in Brussels 2 weeks ago, graphite was mentioned numerous times on the first day, and specifically with regards to defence. And so I think there's a real opportunity for us to basically come up with a new business plan for Woxna. That's where I'm focusing my efforts at the moment, while at the same time getting Norra Kärr permitted and working on that rapid development plan.
Right. You have PEA on Woxna. What are the key findings from the PEA for Woxna, and how do they support the project's financial viability and scalability?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Woxna PEA. You have PEA on Woxna, right? Yeah, and my question is, how how do they support the project's financial viability and scalability?
Yeah. So Voxner is not a big asset, but it's currently it's rated at, from a flake graphite perspective, 10,000 tons a year flake graphite concentrate, and we have the opportunity to move to 15. If we were to do a restart plan, we would consider how we could rate the operation at 15,000 tons a year, and we would need to address permitting on that. But in the short term, it's a 10,000 ton a year flake graphite concentrate mine. The study done in 2021 around the anode materials plant, all graphite companies in Europe looked at moving down this path of, we can't compete with the Chinese on flake graphite, so therefore we have to value add our material, and that started with spheronization, purification and coating, and then moving to anode material. The challenge with anode material is that you have 2 years qualification with a anode manufacturer, and typically what's happened is that period you bear the risk. And so I think we as a standalone company will not go down the anode materials route. What we will do is we will talk to people that are already doing that work and to see if there's a forward integration opportunity. There are several projects in Sweden and Finland that are anode materials projects. And so the opportunity is there to create some vertical integration in Europe, and again around this security of supply in the value chain. So the anode materials project that was done, the analysis was done, it's not all redundant, because clearly the front end of that was to produce the highest quality flake graphite going into the anode production process. But I don't think we will be pursuing an anode materials project as a standalone for Woxna.
Yeah, sure, it makes sense. Your Romanian project exploration strategy, I would like to hear more, particularly the drilling in galleries G7 and G2. Aim to define a large-scale mineable body of cobalt, nickel, gold, and zinc, lead, silver mineralization, right?
Yeah, it's
How is that evolving?
the target, the objective is to, as you described it, is to define something of scale and grade, and it's polymetallic mineralization, so lead, zinc, copper, silver, and nickel, cobalt. So I think Bihor Sud has been, we've been exploring Bihor Sud really actively for about 2 to 3 years before, And from my perspective, it's an exciting project because it's brownfield exploration. So we are actually already underground. I've said in other interviews that we have tens of kilometers of underground development, which as long as we can get in with our mining team, make sure that the tunnels are safe for employees to go in, which is what we've been doing. We can explore from underground, which is a different, a more advanced stage than when you're trying to figure out from surface what's actually sitting below you. And so this is an old uranium mining district. It's a well-known former uranium mining area, but within that, the focus solely by the mining company at the time was around the uranium and not really looking for polymetallics. And so the polymetallics are visibly evident. Before I arrived in the company in 2023, we reported high-grade cobalt and nickel from G7, and then drilling. When we did drilling in there, we found that it was probably more challenging geologically, and it wasn't coming, as we've talked about, in scale. So you had high grade, but it was quite discrete in how it was collected. So we moved our attentions to G2. It's a very long drive, and within that drive, the early stage field work that had been done by the geologists identified visible polymetallic mineralization. So the campaign in G2 has been really about going in there, mapping, channel sampling, and then following up with drilling. So coming up with a really intelligent drill plan and then following up with drilling. Again, things in the junior sector always seem to take much longer than you anticipate. So drilling has been slow, and we've changed drilling contractors to increase the rate of progress. We hired 4 more geologists, European geologists, in January. So they've been on and accelerating that mapping and channel sampling program. And the exploration thesis is still that there's so much visible metal, and we've also got results from channel sampling in this overall system that our conviction is that we believe that we will find something of scale and grade. There's no guarantees, but that's what we're aiming for.
Sure. Yeah, sorry, Kurt, you mentioned uranium. I would like to hear more. Are you finding any uranium in your mine? Is there any economic uranium over there?
We don't report anything on uranium because that's part of our license conditions in Romania.
Sure, I understand. What about doing business in Romania? How would you compare it with Sweden?
I don't think any mining jurisdiction is easy to do business in. I think Romania comes with particular challenges. We have been able to get licenses. We've been able to do work. Things take longer to do, and there is some bureaucracy, and it's a tough nut to crack. I think. But then, when I started in Sweden in 2014, I never envisaged it would take me 7.5 years to get a permit, mining lease for an iron ore project. And I was stopped in that specific case by the fact that the politics at the time of the central government where my application were a coalition between 2 parties, and one party would not vote for the permit being granted. So mining in any jurisdiction is challenging. I think that as a company, and in my experience, both in operations, and I was permitting coal mines in the UK back in the 90s, that good applications. We use a very capable technical team to do our applications, and also good stakeholder engagement. So meeting with your neighbours and engaging with them and addressing issues that might come or concerns that are raised. So that's the way you can make for a smoother path.
Yeah, agreed. How is your let's say, long-term strategy looking? You have this multiple project approach. You have 3 projects. Is your plan to stick? Is your plan to diversify, to maybe spin out some of non-core projects, so to say, and stick with the flagship project? Or tell me more. Give me some color on the next steps for the company in the long term.
Well, I think the strategy at the moment is as you see it. We haven't made any public statements that we will do anything else than develop all 3 separate businesses. If I'm very selfish, and I've been in this situation before as a CEO, where for one reason or other, you as a junior diversify, but then we have such an important project in Norra Kärr that it demands attention and focus. And I think what I would say to the investors is, even though you see effectively 3 businesses in one, that the CEO is very focused on the flagship project, and also in second order that we have a plan for Woxna, and then lastly we have a strong Romanian partner. So we work effectively in Romania because we have a strong local partner. And clearly you need, that's something I forgot to mention, but that's something that's an advantage. And you always need that when you're in a jurisdiction that is just maybe a bit further away. So I think that I have to keep an open mind about the organization of the company, and also how we can maximize value for shareholders. And any one particular day of the week, you can see, fundamentally, I am very much an operator, and I think we have a real opportunity with Woxna and Norra Kärr to have assets that we can put into production, or we create business plans where those assets are attractive. I for once, given again that I spent 7.5 years trying to permit an iron ore operation, I see a real opportunity for a project like Norra Kärr that is critically important to the European Union for heavy rare earth elements, top of the permanent magnet value chain, that, if we get people working in the same direction, because this really matters, that we can have a project up and running, generating cash in 3 to 4 years. And that's really exciting to me. If I talk about production and filling trucks, trains or ships with product that somebody's going to pay me for, I'm very happy.
Yeah. Tell me more about your team. Who are the people behind the company, and how are they involved in everyday company developments, pushing the projects forward, etc.?
So, you should really focus on the board that I have supporting me. Our chairman, Lars-Erik Johansson, is the former CEO of Ivanhoe Mines. He was CEO for, I think it was 13 years. Ivanhoe Mines is one of the most well-known entrepreneurial mining companies in the world, started by Robert Friedland, who is incredibly active still and has been very successful creating huge mining companies and projects. So Lars-Erik is my chairman. He knows everybody in the industry. He's a great sounding board for me. Then we have Daniel Major, who's the CEO of GoviEx Uranium, another Canadian listed company. Daniel is a mining engineer, and again, on the technical side, really good support for me. And then we have Eric Kraft, who's an industrial investor. He's been investing in Leading Edge since 2016, I believe, so more than 8 years now. And Eric owns roughly around 36% of the company, over 36% of the company, and has been investing continually during that time period. So he's a long shareholder, very supportive, and clearly Lars-Erik and Eric are both Swedish. So, it's easy for people in Sweden to look at the company and say, it's a Canadian listed company, what's it doing here? But actually we've got strong shareholders in Sweden as well. We're traded on the Nasdaq First North as well as the TSX.V in Toronto. And then we have 2 key members of our board are Swedish. and then you've got Daniel and myself. My own background is, as you pointed out at the beginning, 30 years in the mining industry. Did a mining engineering degree at the Royal School of Mines, Imperial College in London, back in the early 90s. And then spent the formative years of my operating career in the coal industry here in the UK, surface mining and permitting. Did an MBA London Business School to get out of the mining industry, but then joined Rio Tinto, one of the largest mining companies in the world. And I was at their business evaluation team at, basically doing finance and strategy in the corporate headquarters here in London. And since I left Rio Tinto, it's been sort of 15 years in the junior space in different roles, private equity, research, and back in operations, or I'm back in, as a CEO for the last 11 years now. So, board and management, and then in Sweden specifically, with projects like Norra Kärr, the technical team working on the development of the project are people that I've known for, in some cases, 10 years. The lawyers that I know, the environmental lawyers, I've been working with since 2014. I trust them implicitly. And the same with wise advisors who they're in their 70s and 80s, but often than not, they've seen everything and done everything. And they are part of the overall team. So we have very strong representation, both, in the company, in the leadership of the company, but in the technical people that we work with.
Definitely. Rio Tinto, Ivanhoe, that's a good pedigree. Yeah, agreed. Final question, Newsflow from the company. What and when can investors expect Newsflow, let's say in the next couple of months?
Well, we're going to update investors on what's happening with regards to the study work, both on Norra Kärr and Woxna. We're looking towards the back end, clearly reapplying for strategic project status. We believe we have a good chance of getting that this time because we made significant progress on the areas where we got feedback from the EU around permitting, around the cross-border collaborations and what have you. So lots of progress to report in when we make our next application. With Woxna, it's very much about the restart plan and a new business plan for Woxna. And then towards the back end of the year, what we're hoping for is a positive decision on the mining lease application, the exploitation application on Norra Kärr. And lastly, it's, exploration success in Romania.
That was CEO for Leading Edge Materials. Kurt, thank you for coming to my show, and let's keep your shareholders, my viewers, updated with company developments.
Thanks very much, Lucian.